A new report on transgender care for minors ordered by President Trump has been released, and the trans community is not happy. I'll break it down with the Post's Deputy Managing Editor, Michael Zenny. Plus, the case against former FBI Director James Comey is dealt another blow. Did the feds botch the indictment? And will the case be dismissed before it even starts? I've got the latest. Those stories and more today, Thursday, November 20th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. Lindsay Halligan, President Trump's hand-picked U.S. attorney responsible for the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey, has admitted to a trial judge that the full grand jury never saw the final version of the charges leveled against the disgraced lawman. Excuse me, what? That is not how the grand jury system works. Halligan revised the charges against Comey after the grand jury couldn't agree on one of them, and she told U.S. District Judge Michael Nachmanoff that when she presented the new version, quote, the foreperson and another grand juror was also present, but apparently not the rest of the group. And grand juries function similarly to a trial jury, so picture only 2 out of the 12 hearing a whole case before rendering a verdict. The judge actually called Halligan a, quote, puppet for President Trump. And another prosecutor insisted, though, that the revised indictment was only slightly changed from the original. Still, that's a change. But one of Comey's defense attorneys called for the case to be thrown out, claiming that the indictment had not been properly secured by the full grand jury before the statute of limitations expired. And if you'll remember, this came down to the wire. The expiration date was just a few days after Comey was charged. Now, this latest development is somewhat related to that issue I told you about earlier this week. Another U.S. judge had ordered Halligan to turn over all the grand jury documents that are kept under seal. The feds argued against that order, and that's how they ended up here on Wednesday, with the possibility that this whole thing could just get tossed out. Now, after Wednesday's back and forth, Halligan told the Post in part, quote, personal attacks like Judge Nachmanoff referring to me as a puppet don't change the facts or the law. My focus remains on the record and the law, and I will continue to fulfill my responsibilities with professionalism. President Clinton's former Treasury Secretary, Larry Summers, has resigned his post on the board of OpenAI. That's the company behind ChatGPT, after the revelation that his relationship with the deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein was much more extensive than previously thought. It also prompted another one of Summers' employers, Harvard University, to launch a probe into not only his behavior, but any other ties between Epstein and Harvard faculty. Emails released last week showed that Summers emailed with Epstein frequently in 2017, 2018, and 2019. That's after his pedophile conviction, for those of you who are keeping track. Summers, who served as Harvard's president from 2001 to 2006, announced this week that he would be stepping back from public commitments thanks to this Epstein-related drama, but said that he would continue to teach economics courses at the Ivy League University. A massive law enforcement dragnet in Florida, dubbed Operation Home for the Holidays, recovered 122 missing children and led to 6 arrests. Authorities say that over the course of 2 weeks, they were able to rescue the children, who were between 23 months and 17 years old. Yes, the youngest, just shy of 2 years old. Now, the effort even went beyond the Sunshine State as well, and children in 9 additional states were also rescued, but the exact numbers there just aren't available yet. Law enforcement used real-time intelligence and field operations to locate these missing children. And officials note that, heartbreakingly, many of them experienced some kind of abuse, neglect, exploitation, or exposure to criminal activity. The identities of the 6 people arrested in the operation were not made available, but Florida's Attorney General said in a statement, quote, many of these kids have been victimized in unspeakable ways. We will prosecute their abusers to the fullest extent of the law. A new report released Wednesday that reviewed the scientific basis for providing gender-affirming care to kids found almost no medical evidence to support treatments like hormone therapy for minors who identify as transgender. The findings of the study, which was initially ordered by President Trump, suggest that doctors pause common treatments for gender dysphoria until more is known about the long-term effects on patients. Now, before the results were released, the report went through a scientific peer review and was assessed by 10 different experts and groups. groups, none of which identified any major faults with the findings. To help me dig into the science and what it might mean for the issue in the near term, I'm joined by the Post Deputy Managing Editor, Michael Zenny. So, Michael, tell me a bit more about the findings. I mean, how could this impact the way transgender minors are treated by doctors here in the U.S.?
Well, Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. has already used the first version of this report, which was published in May, to pressure hospitals and doctors to stop giving puberty blockers and other gender treatments to minors. But this is still just a report, right? This is not law, settled law, or policy, and it's a recommendation. That said, it looks like this is going to be used as a bit of a cudgel to change how, some medical providers approach things like gender dysphoria and, transgender identification in kids.
But I think that's an important distinction that you just made there for people who are listening to this and think either like either side of the issue, rah, 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 it's not going to happen, or, oh my God, I can't believe this is not going to happen. This is, as it stands, just a recommendation. The final decision is still made between doctor and patient here. But I want you to talk to me a bit about what's in this report, how a report like this is compiled, what it means now that it's undergone peer review and published in this final form.
This study basically reviewed, parts of, much of the available research about gender-affirming care for kids, right? And what the authors found was what they called low-quality evidence that there should be medical interventions. The report also asserted that there are concerns about long-term psychological effects and quality of life effects for these treatments for young patients. And basically said it didn't say that these things should not be done or that they're bad per se, but that there is not enough evidence that they are positive, right? That there's not enough evidence that they are definitely positively impactful writ large on kids' lives, and as a result of that, doctors should pause that until there is more research, more study on this.
And did I understand you correctly that the report didn't say anywhere that they were denying that there were transgender people or transgenderism is, in fact a thing?
Yeah, I think the report the critics of this report are concerned and critical that the Trump administration and critics of the trans community are going to use this report in this way. But the report was very much hands-off on those big questions. I think the authors tried to go relatively narrowly on this question of what is the medical research behind driving these care decisions for minors who identify as transgender, who seek gender-affirming care.
And there was that kind of pushback when the report was released before it was peer reviewed. The trans community and trans advocates were not happy. And something that they noted was that the names of the researchers were not included. And they surmised at the time that it was a group that shared those ideologies of the Trump administration. And now that the names are public, do we know anything about the group of researchers and maybe where they do stand ideologically?
Yeah. So, and to be clear, I mean, the pro-trans community, the trans community, LGBTQ advocates are still quite unhappy, right? We saw a statement from the Human Rights Campaign today calling it a sham report, calling into question basically the quality of the scientific review. But the authors involved, I mean, there are some, prestigious, high-profile names among some of them. There's a philosophy professor from MIT, a professor at the Duke University School of Medicine, professors at various professors of psychiatry, and researchers at various medical schools. But you also have a researcher, a healthcare researcher for a group called the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, which is an NGO that lobbies against giving gender-affirming care, transgender treatments to minors. So it looks like this is not like sort of a completely unbiased group of researchers, but at least now we do have their names.
Michael Zenny, thank you so much for joining us. It'll be interesting, as you said, to see how exactly this study is used, because what's in the study is one thing, but what it is put to use for is how it impacts people in real life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
NASA scientists are baffled by a rock that the Mars Perseverance rover found on the surface of the red planet. Now, let me temper your expectations a smidge. This thing is just 31 inches wide, but stood out because of what NASA called its, quote, sculpted, high-standing appearance that differed from that of the low-lying, flat and fragmented surrounding rocks. What the heck does that mean? Well, we don't actually know yet, but it could be big. Scientists took a closer look and were able to figure out that the rock had high levels of iron and nickel. That composition suggests it came from somewhere other than Mars, most likely a meteorite. Now, that might not sound like much, but NASA says if further tests prove it is a rock that crash landed on the planet, it could offer all sorts of clues to the history of Mars. Now, this is the second recent big discovery made by Perseverance. This thing's been roving around the planet for the last 5 years, and last year it unmarsed a polka-dotted rock that is among the best evidence that Martian life once existed. We gotta get Matt Damon back there, stat. Kevin Nickel, who wrestled in the WWE under the name Knuckles Madsen, was found shot dead on the side of an Arkansas highway back in July. And now his ex-wife and her new man have been charged with his murder. Nickel and his ex, Amanda Penny, were high school sweethearts. Yes, Nickel and Penny. Well, they met back in 2000, got married in 2012, and according to Nickel's mom, were happy for more than a decade of wedded bliss. But that all went south as you can go. Just 3 days after their divorce was finalized, 40-year-old Penny and her 51-year-old current beau, Michael Hogue, allegedly offed the wrestler, with Hogue reportedly pulling the trigger. Now, Nickel's mom claimed that the new couple enticed her son to meet them, and that's how and when he met his end. This is one of those stories that I am definitely going to follow through to the end. So many times with cases where a spouse offs the other because they just went out of the marriage, we ask, why not get a divorce? But in this case, they did. And it wasn't a week before the guy turns up dead. There is definitely more to this story, I am telling you. Okay, friends, we are exactly 1 week to Thanksgiving. So make sure that you like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, so you don't have to worry about keeping up with the news while you're shopping and cooking, because I'll do it for you.